All right. Okay, I am very excited to have our next speaker on our monthly Zoom. Is a very dear friend of mine, and we are excited in the direction that this organization is going under his leadership. And that is Troy Heinert, and he is the executive director for the Intertribal Buffalo Council. And Troy, I will let you continue your introduction.
Well, thank you, Vicky. Mitakia pi chontewa shtea nampe chuzapilo el Troy Heinert imachapilo. What I said was, hello, relatives. With a good heart, I shake your hand. My name's Troy Heinert. I'm a Sichangu Lakota from the Rosebud Reservation and the executive director, Intertribal Buffalo Council, located in Rapid City, South Dakota. So can everybody hear me okay? All right. And you'll have to forgive me for my appearance. It's hunting season and I haven't shaved for a month. I know it's pitiful, but that's the best I can do. Intertribal Buffalo Council is a group that we are up to 83 member tribes in 22 states. And our vision and mission is to restore buffalo back to tribal lands for that cultural and spiritual connection. And with that, we do have tribes that have built the capacity to where now they are able to process their animals not only for their membership but also for retail sale at other locations. So I'm really good at hauling buffalo and picking up bucking horses. I'm not very good at computers, so I'm going to try to share my screen.
As he's doing that, the thing that he just referred to as Troy's a pickup man in his non-existent free time. There you go.
This, and there should be a way, slideshow. Ta-da!
Oh, not yet. Oh, there you go. Perfect.
Okay. We use this as ITBC received one of the Climate Smart grants, and I think this is pretty fitting to go over with you all about what we're trying to do. We believe that buffalo are an original climate regulator as well as a keystone species. When you think about how what the landscape looks like, a lot of that is because of what buffalo did to it, and then the other animals that followed along, and including the people. So just a picture of buffalo on the landscape up in Browning, Montana, or outside of Browning on the Blackfeet Nation. And the Blackfeet Nation, I don't know if many of you have seen recently released animals on Chief Mountain, which is a very sacred site to the Blackfeet. And the border with Canada is in that range. And these buffalo are going to be able to go back and forth into Canada and back into the United States through that corridor. It's an original migratory route for the buffalo. This is a buffalo from Red Lake, Minnesota. We've restored buffalo back to lots of tribes in Minnesota, and we're working even further east. We have new tribes in Michigan, one in New York. Actually, the Miccosukee tribe in Florida just joined. This is an animal from Fort Peck. And Fort Peck is unique. This Fort Peck houses the quarantine facility or the assurance testing facility of buffalo coming out of Yellowstone National Park. So any animal that goes into the transfer program at Yellowstone, they spend about a year at the Stevens Creek facility, which is located in the park. Then they go about another year at the Corwin Springs facility, which is operated by APHIS. And they're testing for brucellosis. And then after they complete that, they go to Fort Peck for another 9 to 12 months before they are released to tribes. And then we relocate these Yellowstone animals to tribes all over the country. And why they are so highly sought after is, these are really the last of the old ones. These animals genetically are probably as close to the animals that provided for our ancestors as exists on the planet. So Yellowstone buffalo are both different literally and figuratively, but there is a deep cultural connection to those animals. Now this picture is probably one of the saddest pictures you could possibly look at. When you think about the amount of buffalo that were on the continent not very many years ago, anywhere from 150 to 200 years ago, ranging from 30 to 60 million, and what it got dwindled down to just a few hundred. And when you look at this piles of skulls and how large that is and what kind of impact that had on not only our environment or the landscape, but the people who depended on those animals. I think it always, though it is a very difficult picture to look at, it needs to be reminded, we need to remind people of why this happened, and to make sure that we don't do those types of activities again. This is again on the Blackfeet Nation. So ITBC has been around for 31 years. We started as a nonprofit. We are now a Section 17, which means in the eyes of the federal government, we're viewed just like a tribe. So we have those same opportunities that tribes do. And there you see our mission: restoring buffalo to Indian country, preserve our historical, cultural, traditional, and spiritual relationship for future generations. When you think back to that picture of all of those skulls, those buffalo weren't killed because they were mad at the buffalo. That was an attempt to control us as Indigenous people and remove us from the landscape. And so our mission is to reconnect with this animal that was so important to Indigenous people. We do need to update our map, even from 78 tribes. Now we need to add our Michigan and Florida tribes and a couple more Minnesotas. We have buffalo clear up into Grand Portage, Minnesota, which I don't know if any of you have been to Grand Portage, Minnesota. It's a long ways from anywhere. But they've put in the work to bring buffalo back to their area. You see, we have buffalo in Alaska. We actually FedEx 3 Yellowstone bulls to Kodiak Island, which nobody thought was possible. But we were able to make that happen. And I was fortunate enough to fly over them in March of this year. And they had a small herd that was started up there after World War II, or during World War II, actually. And the Alutiiq tribe of Old Harbor was able to purchase the remaining animals from that. It was about 56. And we've shipped those buffalo, the Yellowstone buffalo, up there in 20. Well, flying over them, those buffalo living on that island live probably as close to how buffalo traditionally lived as it ever existed. There's no fences. The ocean is your fence. And those buffalo have split into 3 family groups, and they kind of roam that island as their own family groups. And then during the rut, they all get together and challenge and do what wild animals do. But it's truly amazing to see some of the pictures that come from that area. And strangely enough, there's been no predation. Obviously, everybody knows there's large grizzlies live on that island. The grizzlies haven't figured out what the buffalo are yet. So, you know, at some point there probably will be, but right now salmon must be a lot easier to catch than buffalo. So this is our work. Not only do we help tribes with our herd development grant, we're a pass-through organization, so we receive some federal funding that goes directly to tribes, but we also handle a surplus program. So all of the surplus animals from federal parks, grasslands, we have a relationship with the Nature Conservancy. We handle surplus, and those animals, we pay for the trucking, put the loads all together. And last year, we were able to distribute about 2,200 live buffalo to tribes at no cost. This year, we'll probably beat that mark. Once we finish we're shipping family groups from Fort Peck. So they're going to get, we'll have 4 different family groups of anywhere from 30 to 40 animals that will go directly to one tribe or to 4 different tribes. But they'll stay as a family group the way buffalo live. And then, of course, we provide technical services, you know, for tribes to help design corrals or do pasture management. One exciting new thing that we're starting is an apprenticeship program through the Secretarial Order 3410. We are creating an apprenticeship program for tribal herd managers, which we're going to kick off in May. So we're really excited about that, and we're going to take young individuals. They're going to be in-house types of trainings and things to go over, and then as well as sending them out to tribes, national parks, TNCs to learn other techniques. And we're just going to keep moving these individuals around so they get a wide range of experience on what it takes to truly be a tribal buffalo manager. And Chris is right. Both Chris and Vicki and I, we've all had a relationship for a very long time. You know, when you start talking tribal meat processing, I think, you know, if there was a Mount Rushmore for that, Chris Roper should be on it. And through our conversations and kind of what can tribes do, how can we do large scale, small scale, but still maintain that cultural identity? ITBC was able to design and purchase we call it the cultural harvest trailer. So it's a small trailer with 2 winchers or hoists on the back, and large, you know, refrigerated box. It has onboard hot and cold water, power, and we're able to go out to a tribe out into the field and harvest that animal with grass in his mouth, and then eviscerate him, skin him, quarter him, get him in that trailer while out in the field, and then bring him back to the community so the community can join in the processing of that animal and relearn some of those techniques. That's been it's been very beneficial to tribes, as well as it shows tribes that we can do this, you know, on our own. Now, obviously, the next step is how do we take that product and make sure it's allowable for inspection if we were going to try to do that, you know, to sell that or put it into another federal program that requires inspection. We're not there yet, but it's going to take lots of effort from many people to try to just help tribes get to that point. We also do a lot of policy work. So when you hear things that are happening at the federal level on tribal buffalo or buffalo in general, just like Yellowstone, ITBC is sitting at that table. So Vicki was right. When I don't have a lot of free time to pick up bucking horses, but it does keep me sane. You know, I like to show this picture. You're going to see some kind of vintage pictures here next couple slides, and buffalo back on the landscape is more than just, turning an animal out. This is that reconnection of being able to go out there and see that, for a long time, there's been tribal people who never had buffalo on their lands. And when you bring buffalo back to a tribe for the first time, the songs and the ceremonies that come from that, that have been dormant oftentimes for decades, they come back to life. And, I've been fortunate enough to drive a lot of these trucks and to see the grandmas, the unchis, to see their tears, but the children's smiles, knowing that from this point on, they will always have buffalo. That's pretty emotional to be part of. I had to include this picture just because, when you go to federal parks, they've got the fanciest of the fancy corral systems, and and they're designed for buffalo, so they're great. But we have to remember that when we're working with tribes, most of them don't have those kinds of resources. I never have found out what happened when he caught the calf, but my guess is he didn't jump off and tie him down. But I thought it was important, and we think this is at Crow. We're not sure. And this kind of brings us to where we're at right now. Even through the Climate Smart granting process, there isn't anything specific for buffalo. The grazing standards, the other types of standards that the USDA is promoting don't really fit buffalo, and definitely don't fit tribal management of buffalo. Buffalo are the only animal that really walk in these two worlds as wildlife or as a commercial kind of commodity. And so that balancing act of tribal management, we need policy and regulation to match that as well. So we work really hard with the USDA, and they've been very receptive of, allowing buffalo to be buffalo. You've all heard the term rotational grazing. Well, that's to mimic what buffalo do naturally. So if we're able to get that into some of that rulemaking, then tribes will be able to manage buffalo as wildlife while we're still meeting the criteria that USDA is setting forth. So just some of our partnerships that we're working with on this effort. And I'm not sure what that is. I can't even read it, so I guess it must not be that important. Markets is. And I think that's kind of the end of our slideshow. I don't know how to stop sharing, maybe. Stop sharing. So those are just some of the things that ITBC works on, how we view our relationship with buffalo and what buffalo can mean back on the landscape, at scale. So I was told I had about 20 minutes and to leave some for question and answers. So that I think
you're right on. Yeah, thank you so much. I'll start out with a question. What tribe has the largest herd?
So right now, the largest herd would probably be Cheyenne River. They're running at about probably just over 2,000 animals. Collectively, our 83 tribes manage close to 30,000 buffalo. So if you took that number, tribes would be about the fourth largest in the world.
Wow. Okay, that's what I was thinking. Okay, my follow-up question on that is, what is the percentage of the buffalo that is harvestable? Because it's fairly different than cattle, isn't it?
So, buffalo have a lot longer lifespan than traditional cattle. They're all harvestable. It depends on what cuts and what you're trying to do. They the old bulls will remove themselves from the herd at some point, and but they're generally not the best to eat unless they were to be ground. But they're at some point they're all harvestable.
Okay, awesome. I'm gonna go to Matt first.
Thanks. That was really an interesting. I especially like the pictures. The pictures were great. I'm curious. BLM and USDA and a variety of other federal agencies have specific policies regarding things like wild mustangs, wild burros on the landscape, and they, in essence, form these estimates of what the landscape can hold in terms of what it can support. And I've always been curious about where those come from, and I don't know. But I'm wondering, how does that all play out when we start talking about putting buffalo back on the landscape? Does that mean these same sort of carrying capacity estimates that they're using, are those going to come into play, and they're going to simply say, well, this is sort of the cap of what we can feasibly put on these landscapes, or are they going to let that kind of self-assort? I'm curious about what their policy is going to be in the future.
Great question. And that's one of the things that we're working on, because right now, I think everything is probably cattle based, and buffalo graze completely different than cattle. They have different enzymes, both in their saliva and their snot. They're very intense grazers. So as they move across the landscape, they just graze a lot differently. They don't hang out at like water sources like most cattle do. So that's one of the things that we're working on at ITBC, is to develop those standards for what does it look like for buffalo. These might be the cattle standards, but for buffalo, these would be the standards. And at the same time, we want to make sure that we are supportive in those federal sources as they start to study this more. The Grand Canyon is a perfect example, and we receive buffalo from the Grand Canyon. You don't think of the Grand Canyon National Park as a very animal friendly place, though there's lots of biodiversity within the Grand Canyon, including buffalo. And so they took some spots where they built fences around some grassy areas to study the difference between the grass quality where buffalo are and then spots where nothing could graze. And I think it kind of opened their eyes as to how good the buffalo are on the landscape when they're managed correctly. And that's the surplus program. Is right now they have a standard that says we can house this many, or this is what we think is healthy for this landscape. So all of those surplus animals, rather than going to slaughter, come to us and then are distributed to tribes. But those are some of the efforts we're working on, and we're going to need partners in that as well.
Okay, next question, Craig.
Morning. Yeah, I guess just to follow up, like kind of lean on Matt's question there is, like we were talking the AUMs, and so like when BLM goes out and assesses that, there'd be like 15% gauged towards wildlife, of those AUMs of each range unit. They automatically count the wildlife in. So like would buffalo just go right under that wildlife management for these range units? Like how they previously count in your wild horses, your antelope, your deer, all your different species that are considered wildlife under those projected AUMs. And then on top of it, would they be counted as a double AUM since the size of the buffalo and the intake of what they source? Would that be kind of, or how would they calculate the AUMs I know it's different. I mean, I've heard a lot from it. It's different from cattle to buffalo, but how's the calculation of the AUMs can play into the range units, or do they go under the wildlife aspect of it?
So right now they're calculated just like cattle. But what we're trying to do is get them to view them, as their own species with their own kind of calculation. What we try to do is take because obviously those tribes, especially large land-based tribes, might have access to large tracts of land. The first thing we try to do is, all right, take your AUM and then back that off by about 30% and let those animals work that landscape the way they're going to work it. And it's, learn from the buffalo of how they're going to work that landscape and then make your decision based on that.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. And then second question would be, what's the receptivity on the reservations between the buffalo programs, the cattle ranchers, the native cattle ranchers, and that? And then also, do you guys do like mediation between the buffalo programs and cattle ranchers to bring a better understanding of what it is we are trying to accomplish as natives, on our reservations? Because there's a lot. I mean, just within our work, we find there's a lot of just misinformation or miscommunication there. I was wondering if Intertribal Buffalo Council, if they ever do any kind of mediation between the native ranchers and the buffalo programs to try to bring our people together, instead of create that deal. So, I mean, I just feel that's a really important aspect because we've been dealing with that a lot just through our work. But the main point is to bring all our people back together and create healthy, sustainable food systems through buffalo, through cattle, through whatever it is we grow on our reservations.
Right. Great point, because you get extremes on both sides, right? You got some groups that want to turn everything back to buffalo, and you have others that want nothing to do with buffalo, and both might be tribal people. So it is difficult. We don't do any mediation, I guess, though we are well aware, and we only can work with the federally recognized tribe itself. We don't really work with like tribally connected groups if they're not. You see some tribes are kind of doing, creating little offshoots that might house their buffalo program. Unless the tribe sends us a resolution saying you need to work with this group, we can't really help them, or just even the private native buffalo rancher. And so sometimes there is a disconnect between the tribe saying, yeah, we want more buffalo and we're going to do this and this. And then at the same time, you've got the tribal member rancher going, hey, what'd I do? I pay my lease on time, and don't take my lease away for your program. So, there's obviously conversations, and you need to know your spot. We have opportunity for all kinds of growth. At the same time, we do have tribes that say, or tribal herd managers say, look, if I go get one more range unit, they're going to bring me in front of council, and I don't want that headache. So then what's our next thing? We have to go look at, all right, are there other lands available? How do we either add more to your program through purchase or other leases? Are there range units that are retired and going, could that be part of your program? So, I mean, we're cognizant that there's tribal member ranchers that have the first right, to that ground too.
Yeah. I think it'd be really important to be collectively as organizations to kind of point that out to our tribal producers that, we're all trying to work towards the same goals on whether it be buffalo, cattle ranching, producing, but collectively as organizations, if we could, I think that'd be a great process because it does seem to come up a lot,
Oh, yeah.
and we all want to see the buffaloes back on our lands also too, so.
Yeah, we shouldn't be in competition with each other.
Exactly. Thank you, Troy.
You bet.
Great question, Craig. Okay, Tracy, next question.
Thank you. You answered a lot of my questions through talking to Craig, but I think what would be left over would be, if you do rotate the herds out, what would be the best thing to do with the land as it's resting? And how much time would you give it? Are there other types using that land in other ways when the herds aren't on them? I see and realize that they graze very intensely. So are there best management practices for how to bring that back as quickly as possible so that they can be rotated back in? I hope my question is making sense.
It does, though very seldom. If you're a tribal buffalo program, your land is probably contiguous, and it might be cross-fenced, may or may not be cross-fenced. So it's really about having the right numbers, on that landscape. So very seldom are you, putting buffalo out on one pasture and then pulling them out, 21 days later. It's one is they're too big and too dangerous. You don't handle them like you would cattle. So a lot of times, if you're on a landscape, you're just going to have them work that land the way they're supposed to, and they'll and again, generally these are large landscapes. Though we do have small tribes, and we call those highly managed herds. So where you have to supplement or possibly dry lot for a certain amount of time. And of course, it's all going to depend on rainfall and weather and patterns. But if you have the right amount of buffalo on your landscape, they're pretty good at taking care of it.
Okay,
Yeah,
we're
this is
going. Oh, sorry,
Oh,
Tracy.
go ahead. Well, this is a small herd on a fenced area, and it's moved seasonally.
Yep.
And that works well. It's just that as an extension agent, I'm trying to find ways to enhance the feed, whatever I can do, the soil in between that the tribe could participate in, so that when the herd comes back, it's optimal for them. It was just, yeah, I'm sure we're just unique, but
Well, no, it's because we do, we have tribes in New Mexico, the Pueblos in New Mexico, Northern California, not very large land bases, that need to do things a little differently than what we're able to do up here, in the Great Plains. So, we just try to work with the tribe the best we can. I think our Climate Smart grant, the way we have that written, is going to provide a lot of insight as to future management decisions, as well as using other indigenous land management techniques. The use of fire, the use of other techniques that will help repair and restore land, try to keep the invasive species knocked down, or the woody underbrush. So it's all about being in balance.
Okay, let's go back to Craig.
Okay, just to go back on the Tracy's subject. So as the buffalo managers or the tribals, are they able to utilize some of the NRCS seed broadcasting stuff that are put in for some of those programs to revitalize, like she's saying, revitalize some landscapes and do some seed broadcasting through NRCS equips? Are they able to access those programs, being Buffalo and not a cattle rancher or range unit holder? But I'm just curious if anybody's been able to access those programs, or if they are able to access seeding programs through NRCS.
Great question. And the answer is sometimes. Depending on your location, depending on how if you're going, if you have to go through a state program, to get access to those types of things. Lots of tribes, don't want to deal with the state for, I think we all know many reasons. So it really depends. Now, the hard part is when you do call them out, because everything is cattle based and they're saying, oh, you got to do this, this, this. And you're going, wait a minute, that's not how we want to manage our buffalo, or that's not how buffalo should be managed. So we're just not going to participate. Well, that takes some resources that you would otherwise be eligible for if you were putting cattle on there. So again, that comes back to ITBC going in front of USDA saying, wait a minute, guys, why are we penalizing them? Why are we trying to turn buffalo into cattle, then turn them back to buffalo? They should have access. And at the same time, there should be a direct access from a tribal government to the USDA without having to go through a state program.
Yes, because a tribe should be viewed as an individual producer to USDA, right? So
Right.
they should be able to access those programs just under a tribe being an individual producer itself.
Right.
Right.
Well, and the unique trust responsibility between the federal government and tribes, even different than just being a tribal member rancher. There is a trust responsibility from the feds directly to tribes. And
Thank you.
you're welcome.
So yeah, Matt had a great point. Troy, do you guys ever work with SARE, Sustainable Ag Research and Education?
We haven't as of yet. I don't know if individual tribes do or not.
Okay.
It really just depends on your herd manager, and then the level the tribe wants to engage, with these with other programs or other partners.
So you guys only work directly with the tribes, not like an individual rancher that runs buffalo?
Correct. By
Okay.
charter, I mean, we have to. Now that
Okay.
doesn't mean the individual rancher doesn't call and say, hey, when we start talking about herd health, because if it's affecting a tribal member rancher, if he's got something like Mycoplasma bovis in his herd, that could affect the tribe's herd. Obviously we'll want to make sure that the best information is getting out there, no matter who it is.
Yeah, in the chat, they're putting in some info that I'm gonna make sure you get, Troy.
Okay.
And just as a reference for even like if you're an individual rancher, because they have farmer rancher grants. I sat on their committee for 6 years and executive committee for 2, and they also have research grants that would apply to like the tribe as a whole, because a lot of those will go through a like a university, but a tribe being its own entity, I'm pretty sure that you could do that, maybe just have a tribal college on there. So again, that would go back to Aaron. And then Aaron just said, if you ever want a meeting with the national program leader for SARE, just to see what kind of opportunities, Aaron can set that up, because SARE is funded through NIFA as well.
Sure.
Okay, awesome. I am going to share my screen as we close and show you guys social media for Intertribal Buffalo Council. It has, oh, hold on, this is the problem with doing this. Okay. So it's just, I'm trying to bring up your slaughter trailer, which is really cool. Because they literally, there's Troy talking. They literally go right out. They have a team that goes out. Oh, there's a great picture of it. And you're just kind of right there on the prairie, aren't you? Or wherever the buffalo is.
Yeah.
Like you said, with grass still in their mouth. It's just under Intertribal Buffalo Council. If you want to join their social media page, you can see that the focus on youth and how much they enjoy it.
And
Troy,
so those individuals right there, and then that group, yep, and Sky as well. So all those kids in the red t-shirts there, they were part of our, we called it the Buffalo Seed Keepers, and it was an agreement or a contract with Wind Cave National Park, and they went around to like 6 different tribes this summer and collected native grass seeds and forbs and did grass analysis of those lands. And then those seeds are now stored at Wind Cave. They have a big seed repository there. And tribes are able to access those seeds and to replant if they're gonna go back, you know, and try to rejuvenate their land with native grasses. So